Wyoming Territory, 1882. The wind howled low as the eastbound train screeched to a stop in the dusty town of Red Hill Flats, dragging behind it the hopes of a woman who had never seen the West and a man who had almost stopped believing in love. Brielle Alcott stepped off the train with a carpetbag in one hand and a letter crushed in the other. Her pale blue skirt fluttered around her boots as she stared out at the wide, open land. It was nothing like Boston. No stone buildings, no gaslights, no crowds. Just hills rolling toward the edge of everything and the scent of horses, dry earth, and pine. She was 22, practical-minded, and had grown tired of waiting for something better to come along. When she had answered the mail-order bride advertisement, she had not been seeking romance. She had been seeking safety, a home, a man who would treat marriage as a business arrangement, not a courtship. That was the understanding clear and simple laid out in the letter she now clutched. But the man who waited for her at the edge of the platform, tall and sun-browned with a quiet steadiness in his dark eyes, was not what she expected. "Miss Alcott?" he asked, removing his hat. "I am Vernon Nash." She blinked. "You are not what I pictured." A faint crease formed at the corner of his mouth. "I get that a lot." He was not dressed for town, not in the stiff wool of a banker or the polished boots of a merchant. His clothes were plain, dusted with trail dirt, and his hands bore the calluses of real work. She'd expected a man looking for a housekeeper. Vernon looked like a man who built his life with his own two hands. She cleared her throat. "So you are still willing?" "I would not have sent for you if I was not." There was no charm in his voice, no flirtation, just calm, honest words. That suited her fine. She was not here for love. She was here for a new start. He led her to a buckboard wagon tied to a roan gelding. The ride was rough at first. Jolts knocked her knees together and the wind tugged her veil loose. But Vernon did not talk much. She appreciated that. She was not in the mood for small talk after 3 days of train smoke and crowded rail cars. They rode for over an hour, past thick pines and up thinning hills. When they reached the ranch, she was surprised. It was not large, but it was well kept. The cabin looked solid hand-hewn logs, a stone chimney, and a small porch with a rocking chair swaying in the wind. 2 children, a boy and a girl, sat by the corral fence, watching as they approached. The girl stood first. She looked about 10, with long dark hair and wary eyes. The boy was younger, maybe 6, and he held a wooden carving in his hands. Brielle stiffened. "You did not mention children." Vernon's jaw worked. "They are not mine by blood. Their mother was my sister. She passed last spring. Their father went off 2 winters back and never came back." She looked at the children again. The girl's chin was lifted, proud and guarded. The boy did not speak, just clutched his carving tighter. "I feed them, keep them safe. But they need more than that," Vernon said softly. "They need a woman's steadiness." Brielle looked back at him. "You did not say any of this in your letter. I thought if I told you everything, you would not come." She let out a slow breath, then nodded. "You were probably right." He helped her down from the wagon. His hand was warm, steady. She caught the faint scent of pine and leather. Inside, the cabin was clean but spare. A pot simmered over the hearth and the table was set with 2 plates. He had not expected her to eat with the children, apparently. "I will sleep in the barn," he said. "You can take the bed." "The children sleep in the loft." "That is not necessary. It is right. You are not making this much of a business arrangement," she said, setting down her bag. He paused by the door. "I never said I wanted a wife only for business." She stared at him, but he walked out without another word. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Brielle sat by the hearth, staring into the flames. She was not sure what to make of Vernon Nash. He was not cold, but he was not easy either. There was a quiet pain in his eyes, the kind that came from loss and years of keeping too much to himself. The next morning she woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Vernon was already outside splitting wood. She found the children sitting at the table. The girl Delia looked up. "Are you going to stay?" Brielle hesitated. "I have not decided yet." "I hope you do," Delia said, her voice small. Danny has not smiled in a long time. Danny looked up at her, then down again. He pushed a biscuit across the table toward her. It nearly broke her heart. Over the next few days, Brielle settled in. She cleaned the cabin, showed Delia how to mend a torn dress, and coaxed a laugh out of Danny with a story about a cat who wore boots. She still did not know what to make of Vernon. He worked hard, came in for supper, and said little. But sometimes she caught him watching her with something soft in his eyes, something warm. One afternoon she found him in the barn brushing down the gelding. "You are quiet," she said, leaning against the post. "I speak when I have something worth saying." She looked at him. "And do you?" He met her eyes. "I think you are more than I hoped for," she swallowed. "This was supposed to be a deal, a trade. You get help, I get a home," he nodded. "And I meant to keep it that way. But you are not a trade, Brielle. You are a woman with her own mind, and I have come to care for you." Her heart beat too fast. "You barely know me. I know you stayed, that you are kind to those children, that you do not flinch from hard work, and that when you laugh it feels like morning." She looked away, then back. "I did not come here for love. I did not expect to find it either," he said. "But here we are." She walked toward him, slow, uncertain. He did not move. "I do not know how to trust this," she said quietly. "My father gave my mother no choice. Marriage was a cage for her. I swore I would never be trapped like that." "I will never be a cage," Vernon said. "You can walk any time, but I hope you stay. Not because you need to, because you want to." She looked up at him, and something in her chest cracked open. Maybe this was not a deal. Maybe it could be something real, something soft and steady and true. "I think I do want to stay," she whispered. His hand rose, slow and gentle, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. She leaned in just a little. And in that quiet barn, with horses shifting and the sun slanting through the rafters, she let herself believe that love, real love, might have found her after all. The morning air carried the damp scent of thawing frost and pine sap. Brielle stepped out onto the porch, her shawl pulled tight, watching Vernon lead the mare and two calves toward the lower pasture. A woodpecker's tapping echoed from the trees beyond, and somewhere deeper in the brush, a coyote barked once before going silent. Delia stood beside her, hands tucked into her coat sleeves. "You ever help with calving?" "No," Brielle said, "but I'm willing to learn." The girl nodded like that settled something. Then she turned and went inside without another word. By midday, Brielle had rolled up her sleeves and was elbow-deep in bread dough. Danny sat on the floor nearby, threading corn husks onto a length of twine, his tongue peeking out the side of his mouth as he focused. The door creaked open behind her. Vernon came in, brushing snowmelt from his shoulders. "She's birthed the second one," he said. "Small but strong." Brielle dusted flour from her hands. "Do you need help with the next?" He hesitated, then nodded. "If you're willing." She followed him out to the barn. The sky was the flat gray of late winter, and flakes clung to the fence rails. Inside, the lantern cast wide shadows across the hay-strewn floor. The third cow lay on her side, laboring hard. "You'll want to hold her steady here," Vernon said, showing her where to press. Brielle knelt, ignoring the cold that seeped through her skirt. The cow lurched and she braced harder. Vernon worked quietly, hands sure, breath even. When the calf finally slid free, he cleared its nose and rubbed it down with burlap until it gave a thin, wet cry. "You've got a way with things," she said softly. "I do what's needed." He glanced up. "You didn't flinch once." There wasn't time for that. His gaze lingered on her. You're steadier than most I've known. Heat rose under her collar and she turned back to the calf. That night, after the children were asleep, Vernon stayed by the fire, nursing a mug of black coffee. Brielle folded towels near the hearth, the lamplight casting gold across the floorboards. My mother was from Kentucky, he said after a while. Taught me how to set a broken bone and mend a fence before I turned 12. Brielle looked over, surprised. He rarely spoke of himself. She died when you were young. No, she left, he said. Took my sister with her. I stayed with our father. He was hard. Never held much space for softness. She set the towel down. Did she ever come back? Not until I was grown. She was sick by then. We said what we could before she passed. Brielle didn't ask more. Instead, she moved to sit across from him, the fire crackling between them. I used to read books before bed, she said. Mostly ledgers now, but when I was a girl I liked stories with quiet endings, not the kind with battles or grand escapes, just a person finding a place where they could rest. He watched her, eyes steady. You think you might rest here? I think it's the first place I've breathed full since leaving Massachusetts. Silence settled between them, warm and unhurried. Vernon set his mug down. I can't promise a life without hardship, Brielle. This land takes more than it gives. But I'd meet it with you if you'd let me. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with the fragile hope of being wanted not for duty but for herself. I don't need promises, she said. Just a place where I can be seen. He reached across the space and took her hand. His grip was firm and careful, as if he understood exactly what it had cost her to offer it. Outside, the wind softened. Inside, the fire burned lower but no less bright. The wind shifted by early March, carrying the scent of thawing earth and the distant promise of rain. The snow along the fence lines melted into muddy ruts, and the creek behind the barn ran faster, louder. Brielle had begun waking before the rooster, setting bread dough to rise by candlelight and listening to the soft creak of the cabin settling in its beams. One morning, Delia stood in the doorway with her Sunday dress bundled in her arms. I outgrew it, she said, eyes refusing to meet Brielle's. Danny can't wear it neither. Brielle took it gently. The sleeves were too short by more than an inch, and the hem had frayed where it dragged in mud. She traced the stitching along the collar. I can take it apart, she said. Make you a new bodice and maybe something for Danny from the skirt. Delia's shoulders eased. Mama used to do that. I don't sew like her. But I'll try to do it proud. Delia didn't answer, but she lingered in the doorway longer than usual before heading out. Later that day, Vernon came in from checking the far pasture with a scrape high on his forearm. He washed it at the basin without comment, but Brielle crossed the room with a strip of clean muslin already in hand. You always intend to bleed into your shirts and carry on like it's nothing, she asked. It was the fence. A wire was loose. You could have said so. I didn't want to worry you. She tied the cloth snug, careful not to meet his eyes. I worry either way, she said. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, I'm not used to being looked after. Well, she folded the rest of the muslin. You'll have to get used to it. That night, after the children had gone to bed and the fire had burned down to coals, Vernon sat with his boots off, one foot tapping slow on the floorboards. Brielle was mending the left sleeve of his work shirt, her needle looping smooth and steady. He cleared his throat. I saw you walking the fence line this morning. I wanted to see how far the pasture stretched. You planning on taking over my land? I'm seeing the shape of my life. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I never asked what you left behind. She didn't answer right away. My father was a newspaper man. My mother taught piano. I worked at the ledger desk of a shipping office. It wasn't a bad life. But it wasn't mine. "So you came west." "I came west because I was tired of being spoken over." She tied off the stitch and set the shirt aside. "Back home, I was always someone's daughter, someone's employee. The idea of being someone's wife, if it meant more of the same, terrified me. But you don't ask me to disappear." "I see you," Vernon said. "You're not a shadow here." She stood and crossed the room, the hem of her skirt brushing the floorboards. When she reached him, she didn't sit. She just looked down at him, hands clasped in front of her. "I need to know the truth of something," she said. "All right. Did you write to me because you wanted a mother for the children, or because you wanted someone beside you?" "I wanted both," he said. "But I didn't know how to ask for the second. And now I'd ask." She knelt beside him, her hand resting lightly over his. "I think I'd say yes," she said. He nodded once, slow. His other hand came up, brushing the edge of her jaw, fingers rough but sure. "I don't want to rush you," he said. "You're not." He leaned in, and she met him halfway. The kiss wasn't hesitant or urgent, it was quiet, like the hush before nightfall, like the part of a hymn where the voices drop low. When it ended, they rested their foreheads together, neither speaking. Outside, the wind carried the first hint of spring rain. Inside, they stayed close, surrounded by the smell of wood smoke and the warmth of something slowly, surely, becoming home. A soft mist hovered the morning. Brielle hitched the wagon without waiting to be asked, her apron damp from dew, and her boots already caked with mud. She'd found the old harness where Vernon kept it, hung beneath the eaves, patched a frayed strap with thread from her sewing tin, and set the mare between the shafts while the children finished their porridge. Vernon stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. "You mean to drive into town?" "I do," she said, tightening the buckle near the yoke. "We need needles, salt, and thread, and the children could use boots that don't let the cold in." He rested a hand on the wagon rail, studying her. "You've not been past the ridge since you came. I know what I'm about. You'll take Delia. She's already wrapped up warm and gathering eggs for barter. Danny's staying with your neighbor, the one with the root cellar full of preserves. He and the boy there get on." Vernon nodded once. "Miller's trustworthy. Still, if you'd rather wait, I'd rather not." She met his eyes. "Unless you have reason to think I can't manage." His mouth twitched, not in amusement, but in something close to admiration. "No, ma'am." "I don't." They made the trip in silence, the wagon creaking beneath them, mud splashing up the spokes. Delia sat beside Brielle, cheeks pink with wind, her fingers wrapped around a tin of goose eggs for trade. The road bent through open scrubland, then dipped between cottonwoods greening at the tips. Red Hill Flats came into view just as the sun broke through, throwing gold over the clapboard fronts and wood-planked walks. Brielle guided the mare with a steady hand. She tied up near the general store, helped Delia down, and stepped into the dry, dust-scented quiet of the shop. The clerk, a man with a stoop and tobacco-stained fingers, squinted at her. "You're Nash's new wife, then?" "I am. Didn't think he'd take one again." Brielle set the eggs down gently. "He didn't. We made an agreement." The man's eyes narrowed. "You bringing the girl up proper, I'm teaching her what I know," she said. "And learning what she'll let me." He grunted and turned to fetch her items. Outside, Delia waited on the porch rail. Brielle passed her a wrapped packet of hard candy. "Don't eat it all at once." Delia's fingers curled around it. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." They made 2 more stops, the bootmaker's, where Delia was fitted for a size larger than last year's, and the feed store, where Brielle haggled a better price than she expected for the eggs. She caught more than one curious glance from townswomen passing by. None said much, but their eyes lingered too long. As she climbed back up into the wagon, reins in hand, she turned to Delia. "Do they always look at him that way?" Delia looked down at her lap. "He don't come in often." When he does, folks don't know what to do with him. Why? 'Cause he don't ask for anything. The ride home was quieter. Delia dozed against the sideboard, her boots beside her, wrapped in brown paper. The road was rougher now, the earth softening, ruts deeper. Brielle kept her hands firm on the reins, her thoughts drifting. Vernon was splitting cedar when they returned, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. Danny helped stack kindling, his hands smudged with pitch. He ran up to the wagon before it stopped rolling, grinning shyly when he saw the paper bundle. Brielle handed it down. Delia picked them herself. He clutched the boots to his chest. Inside, after supper, Vernon leaned against the doorway while she refolded the flour sack they'd brought home. "You drove clean and straight," he said. "I was raised to be capable. I know that, I just wanted to say it plain." She hung the sack on the hook. "You're not one to speak without cause. I've been thinking on what we are." She turned toward him. "You mean us. I mean this house. This life. You've stepped into it and made it steadier. I don't know what you want going forward, but I'd like to give what I can." She crossed the room, slow. "Then ask." He met her eyes. "Will you stay, not just as the woman who keeps the fire lit, but the one who shares the bed, the land, and the rest of it?" She reached up, touched the side of his face. "I will." His hand covered hers. "Not because you need to. No, because I want to." He didn't kiss her then. He just held her hand, his thumb brushing the knuckle, and breathed like he hadn't let himself until now. That night, she took off her apron, folded it with care, and left it on the table. When she turned toward the bed, Vernon was already there, the lamp turned low, the room quiet but full. She climbed in beside him, and he pulled the quilt over both of them, her back against his chest, his arm across her waist. No words passed between them. There was no need. The wind had gone still, and the warmth of his breath at her neck was enough to carry her into sleep. By late April, the cottonwoods had leafed out in full, pale green and rustling like distant water. The air softened, days stretching longer, each one stitched together with the quiet rhythm of work and the steadier rhythm of belonging. The earth had dried enough for planting, and Vernon had already turned the garden soil behind the cabin with the mule, and a rusted plow he kept sharpened by hand. Brielle stood at the edge of the plot now, a basket of seed packets tucked under one arm, her skirts pinned up to her knees. "Delia," she called without raising her voice, "take the furrow to the left and walk slow." The girl nodded, tucking her hair behind her ear and stepping into the row. Vernon came from the barn, sleeves rolled, a long-handled rake slung over his shoulder. "That corner's shaded too much by the porch roof. Nothing's going to come up right there." "I figured we'd put the mint where it won't mind," Brielle said, brushing dirt from her fingers. "It's stubborn, like someone I know." He planted the rake in the soil and leaned on it. "You saying I'm difficult, I'm saying you don't move unless you've thought it through from every side. That the worst thing you've found in me," she wiped her hands on her apron, "only thing that's stuck." His eyes softened. "You've changed this place." "I didn't change it. I just filled in the corners." Later, while Delia and Danny washed up at the pump, Vernon followed Brielle into the kitchen. She was stripping the outer leaves from a cabbage, candlelight gleaming on the curve of her cheek. "I sent a letter," he said, voice low. She turned from the table. "To whom?" "The circuit pastor. He comes through Red Hill Flats about twice a year. Next week he'll pass by on his way north. I asked him if he'd stop here." Brielle wiped her hands on a towel, slow. "You want to marry proper?" "I do." She didn't answer at once. Instead, she stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of sawdust on his shirt. "You weren't sure I'd stay, were you?" "I hoped you would, but hoping's not the same as knowing." "I meant it, Vernon. When I said I'd stay, I wasn't waiting to see if it felt easy." He reached for her hand and held it between both of his. "Nothing about this land is easy." but I'd rather face the hard with you than the quiet alone." The wind picked up outside, brushing the window pane with the faint sound of budding branches. Brielle rested her forehead against his chest, and he held her without needing to speak. They were married beneath the cottonwoods the following Thursday, while the children held hands and wild violets bloomed along the fence line. The pastor said the words with his hat pressed to his chest, and Vernon placed a plain gold band on her finger that had belonged to his mother. Delia wore a dress Brielle had sewn from a folded length of muslin found in the back of the dry goods store. Danny stood between them, solemn and still, holding tight to a sprig of clover. When the vows were spoken and the blessing given, Vernon didn't kiss her with ceremony. He kissed her like he meant to carry that moment into every morning that came after. That night, with the children tucked beneath quilts upstairs and the fire burning low, Brielle stood barefoot by their bed, her hand skimming the carved cedar post. "I used to think love had to come fast," she said. "That it would sweep in and change everything." Vernon stepped behind her, his arms circling her waist. "And now I think real love is slow, like water through stone." He bent to kiss her shoulder. "Then let it keep running." They lay together without urgency, the hush of their bodies speaking more than vows or promises. When the lamp burned out, they stayed close, her head on his shoulder, his hand resting over hers. Years passed, but the shape of their life never lost that quiet steadiness. Delia grew into her mother's height and her aunt's will. She took up reading by lantern light, then bookkeeping, and eventually found her way to a schoolhouse where she taught children to write their names in careful, curling script. Danny became a boy who laughed easily and carved animals from pine knots, selling them for pennies at the summer fair. He built a wheelbarrow from scrap wood before his 12th birthday and tended to the mule like it was kin. Brielle kept the hearth warm and the shelves full. She never stopped writing in her ledger, even when the pages turned soft with years. Vernon kept the fences mended and the fields turned, and each evening he came in smelling of sage and hay, his hands rough but never unkind. They never spoke of what their life might have looked like elsewhere. They didn't need to. It was enough to share a quiet meal, to feel the weight of a familiar hand at the small of her back, to hear him say her name like it was a place he meant to stay. And he did. Until the end of his days, he stayed. When the last snows melted each spring, new shoots rose along the path to the pasture, and the mint she planted near the porch crept in thick and green. And every year, on the same day the pastor first arrived, they laid out a table beneath the cottonwoods, broke bread with friends, and remembered the day they chose each other, not in haste, not in desperation, but in the quiet certainty that the life they built was not given but made together. Brielle and Vernon Nash lived a long, full life side by side, tending to the land, to the children, and to the love that had taken root and grown, slow and strong, like water through stone.